Okay, welcome to the last lecture in this session. But I would like to say we have panel lectures two today, and I would like to invite you to visit these lectures today. Because it's not good if someone presentation or without mic. So, this next is Natalia Juchniewicz from the University of Malta. And the topic is the spirit in the machine, Hegel's philosophy of technology. And when I read this, I remembered Pink Floyd. Welcome, my son, welcome to the machine.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, because last year I was one of the organizers of the Hegel Congress, having no possibility to give my own talk. So I'm very happy that I can share my research with you today. Having an opportunity to give a speech during 34th Hegel Congress, and especially during the Congress focused on the problems of the spirit and culture, I have decided to present the field of studies which is achieving more attention in recent years, the philosophy of technology. For some of you, combining Hegel with philosophy of technology may seem like an opportunistic approach, as the multitude of problems around evolving technology leads many researchers to combine classical theories with modern problems. And while I know that among interpreters of Hegel's philosophy, some explicitly say that Hegel did not deal with technology because he simply did not know it in its developed form, I will show that in a broader sense, Hegelian philosophy provides the way of thinking which is crucial nowadays, because it allows us to consider the artificiality and mediational dimension of human life. In my opinion, contemporary discussion about artificiality, for example, in the case of artificial intelligence, does not focus on the meaning of artificiality for human culture. The same problem can be seen in the case of the concept of mediation. There are hundreds of articles using this concept in the field of philosophy of technology, whereas only a few of them try to answer the question of what mediation is. Of course, some philosophers tried to analyze Hegelian philosophy from the point of view of technology studies, but because most of them were Marxist-oriented, the discussion was dominated by the problem of labor and alienation, whereas nowadays we have much more problems with technology which need to be undertaken. Of course, I have in mind especially the Frankfurt School or the research of Lukács. The Hegelian theory offers, however, much more interpretive tropes for the study of technology. As it is often repeated by Slavoj Žižek, the 21st century will be Hegelian, because this thought is opened towards the future. It is hard not to agree with Žižek in this case, especially when it is seen that Hegelian theory becomes more and more important for technology studies. Hegelian philosophy in general provides an inspiring approach to thinking about technology because it is based on dialectics, and dialectics is a process of change. History in Hegelian philosophy has its direction, which is freedom, but the fulfillment of the freedom is determined by its actualization in the concrete, intellectual, institutional, and material form. It delivers twofold possibility. On the one hand, dialectics might be understood as a method of revealing the truth, but this revealing is possible only through practice, so dialectic is practice. On the other hand, if the aim of humanity is freedom, the forms which different cultural achievements take in the history are both necessary and contingent. They have to appear to make progress, but they cannot be determined in the sense that everything has been planned because then there would be no freedom at all. Hegelian dialectics, which is based on the concept of mediation and sublation, is a process through which the spirit reveals itself and humanity can achieve self-understanding, but only through the process of building mediational forms of expression. The Hegelian theory is not a theory of direct knowledge and direct experience. That what is immediate must become mediated, and only through mediation it is possible to develop in the dialectical process. Technology, as I will try to prove, is one of such expressions, such mediations. And because of this, Hegel can be understood as a philosopher of technology, not because he knew concrete technological artifacts. I agree with a methodology suggested by two authors who, as far as I know, independently of each other, have drawn attention to an important dimension of Hegel's philosophy of technology, which is the necessity of deriving it non-straightforwardly from certain concepts and categories. These authors are Christoph Kubisch and Juk Hui. The former has pointed out that Hegel's philosophy of technology has a latent character. It has to be extracted from the texts, and in this sense, only with the proper optic, there is a possibility to see that Hegel was a philosopher of technology. The second author notes that what characterizes Hegelian dialectical thinking is recursivity and openness to the contingent. The Hegelian system is by no means closed. One could say, in other words, that it is closing, but embracing that what emerges in the development of culture, art, in social and political life, in a way that is incidental to the subject's consciousness. That is why I will focus on the chosen fragments of Hegelian theory connected with the analysis of technology, being aware that there are lots of other fragments. And according to my knowledge, even among us in this room are scholars who focus on these other aspects of Hegelian theory, such as detailed analysis of labor, modern society, politics, capitalism, where I took part in different talks, and I'm pretty sure that we have much in common. During my speech, I will reference different scholars, but most of them are not, so to say, hard Hegelians. I believe that the extension of Hegelian studies with the theories inspired by Hegel's philosophy might be refreshing for our own studies. Sometimes the sight from the external position reminds us that we can still find something interesting in the theory we all well know. I will show this process of building artificial mediations as a key assumption of Hegelian philosophy, beginning with the theory of medium and media. Analyzing the concept of medium and its relation with syllogistic thinking, I will try to prove that Hegel is a necessary theoretical background for negative media theory. The philosopher who will assist me in this analysis will be mainly Dieter Mersch. Then, focusing on the cultural value of tools and mediations between human being and nature, I will explain what it means that technical artifacts might be understood as extensions of the spirit. Moreover, the building of different collective institutions can be perceived as a part of technosocial activity, where people and human ethicality not only express but also are shaped. This analysis will be assisted by the theory of mental institutions introduced by Sean Gallagher and Anthony Crisaffi. So actually, this is the cognitivist approach. And the analysis of the consequences of extensions of the human spirit will be confronted with Slavoj Žižek's question about a possibly unmediated future of wired brains. Shaping the external reality in a technical way through tools opens the possibility for the machine to emerge. I will confront the concept of machine and automation with the idea that delegation of human activity to artifacts makes us vulnerable masters of technology. This is a suggestion of Mark Kekelberg, Dutch philosopher of technology, and his analysis of master-slave dialectics. Finally, I will ask the question about the future and anthropocentric consequence of Hegelian approach, analyzing it in the context of the Anthropocene. So actually, during my speech, there are four main topics: media theory, technical artifacts as extensions of the spirit, machine and automation, and finally, Anthropocene and our aptitude to nature. Following the title of my speech, I would like to justify that the machine and our thinking about technology contain first and foremost the spirit, and therefore is based on historically shaped collective practices of thought and action. The machine is not only a tool, or to say it in other words, the machine is not predominantly a tool, but rather is the expression of the progress of the spirit, the necessary mediation through which we can understand ourselves and each other. I will start with the theory of medium and mediation to analyze the dialectical basis of Hegelian analysis of means and tools. It is worth highlighting that generally the theory of mediation is crucial for the contemporary philosophy of technology, and the fact that we can find in Hegel a founding father for a theory of modern media was especially emphasized by Dieter Mersch. An etymological analysis of the term medium points to the Latin medium and medius, being in between. A medium is therefore not an instrument or tool for discovering something new, but rather acts as a passive intermediary. The basis for the Latin medium is the Aristotelian understanding of the concept of metaxy. This term is used by Aristotle in his treatise on the soul to describe that third thing by which the eye can perceive something. In the Greek philosopher's conception, for the eye to be able to see an external object, that object must transmit something. In other words, perception involves the sending of information. Seeing is done based on receiving the content made available by objects. Thus, according to Aristotle, this transmission has to take place somewhere. It has to have some kind of carrier, which is, of course, the metaxy. In reconstructing the origin of the term media, Mersch points out that the metaxy, as the third thing, The thing in between began to be identified with materiality, taking on the scientific form of ether or fluid in modern times. The medium was then thus seen as the basis for seeing, feeling, and experiencing reality by humans, and was therefore aesthetic in nature, not aesthetic, but aesthetic, right? It was only in the 17th century that the development of optical and acoustic tools led to the coupling of metaxy with technology in the sense of the use of instruments and tools, while the discovery of magnetism and electricity in the 18th century extended the concept to energy invisible to the naked eye. This is thus a contradiction in the ontology of the medium. It is something that makes it possible to experience the world, but at the same time is itself invisible. The medium is transparent in subject-object interaction, merely an intermediary or link. Undoubtedly, this transparency of the medium influences the difficulty of clearly grasping the modern media and determines why exactly Hegel can become a philosophical media theorist. The medieval science of syllogisms was based on the Aristotelian concept of medium, which assumed that the middle term acts as an intermediary that disappears into the conclusion while making it possible. Syllogism was not a method of knowing the truth in the Middle Ages. It was merely a rule or principle of thought, a rational order. Mersch points out that it was the constantly disintegrating middle ground that inspired Hegel's study of the principle of transmission of the content in the science of logic. Syllogism is thus the basis of dialectical thinking and the notion of sublation, Aufhebung, for it presupposes that simultaneous continuance and disappearance of the premises of inference. Sublation is both distraction and preservation. And now quotation from Mersch. This figure also corresponds to that center or mediality of the concept, as it appears in the middle of the second part of Hegel's Wissenschaft der Logik, where it is identified as the negativity of mediation, namely as the constantly disintegrating center in the process of mediation, as Hegel puts it. This is the fundament for the concept of negative media theory. Embedded in a series of concepts that are structurally related and have similar characteristics, it refers to the irreparable negativity of medial process in general. End of quotation. The notion of syllogism and sublation, as we know, is fundamental to Hegelian dialectics and is also present in those fragments of his theory where he explicitly refers to technological artifacts. Mersch emphasizes that the Hegelian theory of medium, or the middle term, expresses that media are ambivalent. They make it possible for something to appear, but they also change what appears. They are negative in a double sense. They are invisible, but their invisibility allows something third to emerge, only thanks to their negative transcendence. Mersch focuses on this logic of medius terminus to emphasize that thanks to Hegel, such media theories as Flusser, Kittler, or McLuhan could have built their theories, because the statement that the medium is the message is quite literally part of Hegelian dialectical thinking. For me, however, a more detailed analysis of the medium in Hegelian theory delivers even more important problems. The analysis of the means and tools presented in the science of logic is crucial here because Hegel reveals the role he assigns to the instrumental medium in the dialectic of teleology. And now quotation from Science of Logic. Through a means, the purpose unites with objectivity, and in objectivity unites with itself. This means is the middle term of the syllogism. Purpose is in need of a means for its realization because it is finite. In need of a means, that is to say, of a middle term that has at the same time the shape of an external existence, indifferent towards the purpose itself and its realization. End of quotation. Through a means, externality and the purpose permeate, since the means has no internal definition and can be used as a neutral basis for mediation. Significantly, Hegel points out that the means must be a kind of mixed entity or in-between, between the external nature processed in the actualization of the purpose and the subjective end itself. The means is thus not an arbitrarily chosen object, but expresses within itself the rationality of the end that defines it. Hegel refers to the relation of mediation made possible by the instrument as the syllogism of external intentionality, meaning, of course, that the process of instrumentalization of action is rational, mediating and subordinating nature's purpose imposed on it from outside. At the same time, Hegel draws attention to the transience and finiteness of purposes. The purpose is nothing absolute, and what emancipates itself in the movement of the realization of the purpose is the means, because, as a middle term, it merely serves, itself being external to the relation in which it is situated. Servitude seems to be a relation of subordination that limits freedom, but in that what constitutes the medium, Hegel sees the higher principle of action. Again, quotation from the Science of Logic. But the means is the external middle term of the syllogism, which is the realization of purpose. In the means, therefore, the rationality of the purpose manifests itself as such by maintaining itself in this external other, and precisely through this externality. To this extent, the means is higher than the finite purposes of external propulsiveness. And now will be my favorite quotation from Hegel: the cloth, so Flug, is more honorable than are immediately the enjoyments which it procures and which are the purposes. The tool lasts while the immediate enjoyments pass away and are forgotten. It is in their tools that human being possesses a power over external nature, even though with respect to their purposes, they are subjected to it. End of quotation. Hegel states that the plot is more important than the end it pursues. The dialectic of ends and means consists precisely in the fact that the insertion of the means makes the plot as a tool disappear from the field of our attention in concrete action. But as far as historical relevance is concerned, the plot is far more enduring than our human ends. If we consider what is historically more durable, the human ends or the plot, we realize that material culture is the sphere of disappearing means, tools that have survived even though in the moment of action they were only ready to hand, using Heideggerian term. So they were transparent beyond the conscious attention in the moment of action. Moreover, Hegel points out that material ends, such as concrete artifacts, also constitute specific means, media, that continue to be negated. And again, the quotation. A house, a clock, may appear as purposes with respect to the instruments employed in their production. But the stones, the crossbeams, all the wheels, the axles, and the rest that make up the actuality of the purpose fulfill this purpose only through the pressure which they suffer, through the chemical processes to which they are exposed with light, air, and water, and from which they shield the human being, through their friction and so on. They fulfill their vocation, therefore, only through their being used up and worn out, and only by virtue of their negation do they correspond to what they are supposed to be. They are not united with purpose positively, because they possess self-determination only externally, and are only relative purposes, or essentially only means. Teleological action finds its truth in the fact that the end is fulfilled and turns out to be a means of realizing another end. Hegel here points to instrumentality as a semblance, For the object, although it appears external to the concept, is precisely non-self-contained, dependent, and subordinate to it. No end can be realized unless there is a means of realizing it. The disappearing medius terminus of teleological action reminds us that the medium is the carrier of the content, but its ontology is based on being transparent. The medium is negative, it never appears in itself, but always for another being. Mediation, using a Hegelian term, means that being in between is a moment of dialectical change and sublation. Its negative character is, however, dialectical. We achieve our goals using technical artifacts, but it is the objectivity of tools that will last after our death. Production of tools is important not only because they enable the achievement of different human goals, but also because being durable, they are career of culture. I will turn now to the analysis of tools as the expression of culture to explain why and how Hegelian theory is crucial for our current discussion of technological changes and extensions. Even the theory of the extended mind is inspired by actually Hegelian philosophy. Hegel, to repeat his words, assumes that the plough is more honorable than are immediately the enjoyments which it procures, and which are the purposes the tool lasts while the immediate enjoyments pass away and are forgotten. The lasting of the plough makes it culturally more important than the subjective aims of people who used this tool. As we know, also from the famous dialectics of master and bondsman, the main ability of the human being is to hold desires to control our immediate needs, to build mediations in our relation to the external nature, but also the nature in ourselves. The plough must be more honorable because human needs are never an argument strong enough for Hegel to say that their fulfillment is the aim of human culture. The aim of culture is self-understanding and self-expression of the spirit, and human needs is the career of this cultural development. That is why the result of the introduction of tools to human action is the development of practices that can be shared and valued, inherited or learned. The tools fulfill human needs, but they also disclose the ideas that stay behind them. Quotation from Vienna Lectures, 1856. In the tool and in the plowed and cultivated field, I possess a possibility, a content as something universal. Thus, the tool as means is of greater value than the goal of desire, which goal is particular. The tool encompasses all such particularities. End of quotation. Tools are expressions of human purposes, and even if these purposes are forgotten, we can understand values and practices that were important to people through tools. We can extend this statement and an analysis of a material culture with the concept of the objective spirit. But before I will do this, I just want to mention that what I've just said is quite important as far as I know for example, archaeological studies or material culture studies, that we actually can discover the meaning and ideas, the values that we all share in culture through material tools. And that is why, of course, concrete tools and artifacts in the material form are so important for such kind of researchers. If human practices might be preserved in tools, the same should be able in the case of rights and law. The field of ethicality is also dependent on the material careers of intersubjectively shared values. To look at this cultural consequence of the analysis of tools, I want to introduce to my analysis a concept which comes from analytic philosophy, which is mental institutions. A mental institution is defined as the cognition that goes on in one's individual head is really derivative from, or perhaps an internalized version of these larger processes, socially instituted processes that are ongoing and outside of any particular individual's head. It means that there is no pure individualistic cognitive process because human cognition is always rooted in the social mental institutions which limit or broaden, but definitely channel our thinking and understanding of ourselves and the external reality. As it is analyzed by Sean Gallagher and Anthony Crisafi, who introduced this concept of mental institutions, the Hegelian concept of the spirit might be, and sometimes even is translated this way, as the evolving mind. The spirit is the mind which develops similarly to the statements posed in the inactive or the extended mind theory, which is the mind which assumes that the mind, as reflected in an exercise of will, appropriates the things around it, and in so doing becomes invested in those things. As it is stated by Michel Pointe, the spirit is both the activity, mental and practical, as the results of this activity. As the results are equally formatting for the spirit as the action itself, then it is clear that not only material tools are carriers of culture, but also mental institutions such as rights and law, educational system, corporations, or police might be understood as collective mental tools that affect the way human beings understand their external reality and build the intersubjective relations and values. In my opinion, these two levels of thinking about instrumentality in Hegelian theory were rather missed out. For example, in the analysis of Vienna manuscripts by Jürgen Habermas, who assumes also that the project from early manuscripts of Hegel has been radically changed by him in his major philosophy, it is assumed that the spirit expresses in three dimensions: language, tools, and family. Moreover, Habermas states that the spirit is, and very short quotation now, the medium within which one eye communicates with another eye and from which, as an absolute mediation, the two mutually form each other into subjects. End of quotation. However, this interpretation focuses on the relation between symbolization in language, labor for tools, and recognition through love and family as three different moments of building intersubjective relations. He even shifts the attention from technological artifacts to the social phenomenon of work, so Habermas' focus is not on technology but on intersubjectivity and communication. This results in an inability to see that the transition from language through tools to family and possession of things is a process of building an increasingly mediated relationship with external reality, other people, and oneself. However, from the point of view of technology studies, language also could be understood as a tool, as the hammer is. The family, even if it is convincingly analyzed by Axel Honneth as the initial step of our building of recognition, from a sociological point of view, is also an instrumental institution that has to obey different rules and is created for concrete aims. Because of the focus on the very literal understanding of technology and tools in Hegelian theory, mental institutions were not treated as technologies, but rather as exclusive spheres of intersubjectivity and self-consciousness. It is, however, important to change the perspective to see that inside of Hegel's system was always rooted in the idea that practical and mental culture are equally important in shaping the spirit. The intersubjectivity does not change the fact that they might be understood as technologies. As Marek Siemek, Polish philosopher, emphasized it in short quotation, it is above all Hegel who achieves the fullest philosophical recognition of this close coupling between the instrumentalization of human object actions, the rationalization of socio-cultural forms and norms of interpersonal coexistency, and the emancipation of man himself as an autonomous, rational subject. End of quotation. Moreover, the fact that the spirit is not only the action, but also the result of its action, opens the possibility to look at the material culture as the extension of the body and mind. This theory was actually the first technological inspiration that came from Hegelian studies and was suggested by Ernst Kapp. He believed that technology is based on the projection and extension of human organs on reality, what, by the way, was only repeated by McLuhan. The microscope looks better than a naked human eye, and the telephone hears more clearly than a human ear. However, our intersubjective relations are built nowadays through the mediations such as the internet. Our collective knowledge is put on websites and shared with others. We are looking for something in the browser. We are confronting not only the algorithmic machines, which are hidden medium, but other people. The media technologies as such are again the career of cultural values and practices. Even they are more and more digital, and Hegel would say artificial. This is, of course, an optimistic approach to the mediational dimension of our lives nowadays, but it still demands analysis of the medium as such. If media are cultural, artificial products of the human spirit, then they are also the lens through which we can understand our condition and our spirit. This optimistic perspective might, however, be confronted with the optic, at least ambivalent, on the changes that could come with the emerging technologies. Extended mind, the extended spirit, could be nowadays understood as the collective wired brain, as it was recently analyzed by Slavoj Žižek in his book titled Hegel and the Wired Brain. By the way, Žižek was not the first who invented this idea of a wired brain in the case of the Hegelian studies, because in 2017 it has been mentioned in the article of Freddy Kislev's 6 Hegelian theses about technology. So Žižek wasn't the first. The analysis of Žižek, even if in detail a bit obscure, I don't know whether you like this way of writing. I sometimes I am a bit confused with his associations with different popular series or movies, and I'm not always sure whether I follow his narrative. However, he raises the crucial for the 21st century problem of the human spirit in the possible time of no mediations at all. Introducing the concept of a wired brain, or borrowing the concept of singularity from Ray Kurzweil, Žižek asks the question: what will happen with the human spirit, with our subjectivity, if something like a wired brain will effectively emerge? The idea of a wired brain refers to a direct sharing of thoughts and experiences with each other and digital machine, a neural link. It is, in other words, a brain-computer interface. I know it sounds like science fiction, especially in the words of Žižek, but such interfaces are built, especially for paralyzed people who cannot use any muscle to communicate with the world, or for jet pilots who have sometimes less than seconds to take a decision during a flight. It is difficult to imagine the world totally wired in the way assumed by Žižek. But even if an example of Neuralink mentioned by him is too radical, we already have algorithms which, invisibly to our consciousness, show us the digital world adjusted to each of us, not necessarily all of us. That's what scares Žižek in the vision of Neuralinks is the end of mediations, such as language and the possible loss of subjectivity hidden in our unconsciousness. If we could share our thoughts with others directly, not through speech, not through culture, but the transfer of information from one brain to another or a machine, then, according to him, that would be the end of humanity, the end of subjectivity, the end of intimacy, and all of that make us humans. Žižek says, very short quotation now, Neuralink eliminates the very symbolic space in which Aufhebung can operate. End of quotation. As we can see, without sublation, there is no dialectics. Without dialectics, there is no human thinking. The general aims of Zizek are a bit different to mine. He would like to rethink the role of capitalism becoming surveillance capitalism, and then consciousness becoming possibly open to algorithmicizing, in the process of building a wired brain and therefore changing the human spirit. My aim is rather to bring to mind that Neuralink is the same medium as anything else culturally produced by humans. It is even worse. We already live in a world that is wired because at least half of, or maybe not half, but you are, well, I'm very surprised that you are so focused on my speech. I cannot see people who are, for example, checking their phones. So maybe some of you during my speech have checked an email, Facebook updates, also the commercials chosen for you by algorithms, probably suggesting interesting restaurants in Zadar. Zizek is alarming not about the future which will come, but the future which is present. The problem is that it is still a human product. Algorithms, like any other product of human action, are human products and they tell us about human relations. To mention Hegel in this argument, and this will be the quotation from the paragraph 197 from the Philosophy of Right. The mediation whereby appropriate and particularized means are acquired and prepared for similarly particularized needs is work. By the most diverse processes, work specifically applies to these numerous ends that the material which is immediately provided by nature. This process of formation gives the means their value and appropriateness, so that man, as a consumer, is chiefly concerned with human products, and it is a human effort which he consumes. It is by the sweat and labor of human beings that man obtains the means to satisfy his needs. Zizek does not see that even neural links are mediations. They mediate human thoughts and the external world. And to be honest, they play the same role the language plays in any culture. Can I share my thoughts with you without words, using the power of my body? Yes, in gestures. Is there any difference if I could do this through the computer interface by speaking to you directly from my brain? I hope, by the way, that I use also my brain now. I do not think so. The problem is not the technology, but the culture. We want the values we share and the relations we would like to build. Furthermore, Hegel assumed that work is a transformation of nature. But today, work is largely based on the transformation of the second nature, of our practices, thoughts, and social relations. In my view, this is a much more important perspective on the critique of capitalism than the idea of the wired brain. And by the way, this idea came to my mind after the speech of Andreas Arndt, when there was discussion about the concept of work and the fact that Hegel defines work as transformation of nature. So it came to my mind that nowadays work is rather a kind of exploitation of the second nature of as I said, different practices that we share with each other. The fact that without mediation there is no culture and no humanity is, however, an important lesson from Zizek's analysis. We focus on them in the next part of my speech about the concept of the machine. Hegelian analysis of the teleological action, mediation, and the means is used by him to raise the problem of the machine. The machine appears when a human being can replace himself with an artificial thing, and the use of the instruments such as plow is a good example of this process. When, however, a human being can control natural forces and use them instrumentally, he is also able to build a machine. Quotation from the Jena lectures. Man's labor itself becomes entirely mechanical, belonging to a many-sided determinacy. But the more abstract his labor becomes, the more he himself is merely abstract activity. and consequently, he is in a position to withdraw himself from labor to substitute for his own activity that of external nature. He needs more motion, and this he finds in external nature. In other words, pure motion is precisely the relation of the abstract forms of space and time, the abstract external activity, the machine, end of quotation. The abstract external activity is the source of the machine because machine is the effect of motion and spatio-temporal relation. The machine therefore replaces human bodily motion with the artificially created one. This is, as Hegel says, the cunning of reason, to substitute bodily motion with the motion of the machine, even if both of them are mechanical. With his analysis of the machine, Hegel introduces the division of labor, which is also a ground for automation of action. And now will be the paragraph which probably appeared during this conference, I don't know, maybe not hundreds of times, but at least a couple of times. So paragraph 198 from the philosophy of right. The universal and objective aspect of work consists, however, in that process of abstraction which confers a specific character on means and needs, and hence also on production, so giving rise to the division of labor. Through this division, the work of the individual becomes simpler, so that his skills at his abstract work becomes greater, as does the volume of its output. At the same time, the abstraction of skill and means makes the dependency and reciprocity of human beings in the satisfaction of their other needs complete and entirely necessary. Furthermore, the abstraction of production makes work increasingly mechanical, so that the human being is eventually able to step aside and let a machine take his place. End of quotation. Hegelian analysis of technological changes, from bare human hands through tools to machines, on the one hand is the analysis of more and more artificially complicated human culture, but on the other is building a distance to the external nature. These two problems are well seen even in the master-bondsman dialectic from the phenomenology of spirit, where the bondsman is forced to labor and transform the external nature, whereas the master distances himself from nature. The labor of the bondsman in the discourse of philosophy, by the way, philosophy of technology, it is rather translated slave for some reasons, becomes technical. The bondsman achieves techniques, an ability to produce and use tools, which is the ground to substitute a human being with a machine. Mark Kekelberg reminds us that in this process of technicization of human life, there is a danger of becoming vulnerable, similarly to the vulnerability of the masters from Hegelian dialectics. The moment the master does not work, he becomes a part of the past, not the future of the human culture. Kekelberg calls this the tragedy of the master, and extends this process to our contemporary dependency on technology. We are masters of technology, and the tragedy is over our heads. Being dependent on technology makes the master vulnerable, alienated from nature and automated by the machine, where automation means the delegation of action to the machine. Any transferring of human labor to technology results in less cultural abilities for people, because automation makes people automated. Moreover, automation is not only about human-technology relations, but most strikingly about human-human relations. And now quotation from Kekelberg. Is automation in the form of robotics and artificial intelligence used to increase inequality and injustice? By whom is it used? Will it be used? If the use and development of automation grow, who will gain and who will lose? What will be the societal consequences? How does automation change and make possible different power relations? End of quotation. This question has to be asked if we want to understand the rising role of technology in the 21st century. To answer them, Kekelberg points out we might need non-academic and non-technological approaches, such as artistic activities, for example. Art can show different relations we might build with technology, instead of researching them and naming them. Language, in this case, might not be very helpful. In the language, it is easy to repeat the instrumentality and oppressive attitude toward technology, as, for example, disclose the discussion about human attitude to robots, often called our new slaves. The technology could be our ally, but only when we remember that it is made and used by humans, so it emanates social and cultural practices of all of us. That is why, in my opinion, Hegel believes that different problems of modern society, connected with the negative effects of technological progress, might be solved by different institutions, also mental institutions, or by sharing common values which should suppress alienation as a side effect of instrumentality in everyday practices. According to me, the analysis of the Hegelian machine reminds us also of our dependency on nature, because the machine replaces the human being in the direct confrontation with nature. However, nature didn't disappear. Of course, Hegel assumes that culture rises over nature, building a distance and mediations. However, he assumes that sources of nature are not limited. Some of them are even given ready to be consumed. Hegel says, for example, about water. Perhaps water is unique in that it can be drunk as it is found. I am not sure whether in the age of climate catastrophe, water can be so easily drunk, or whether there will be any water to drink soon. This short quotation reminds us that the technological progress we know has dramatic consequences for the Earth. Moreover, it is also important to understand that nature became a part of technological system, especially when it started to be treated as a source of data. The fact that external nature is the necessary background of our everyday practices, but becomes more and more a skeleton for a smart environment which works on diagnostic order in the two sense of datafied situations, make the problem of freedom in the age of developed technologies the most important. So can we still be Hegelians in the 21st century with his optimism and belief in cultural improvements? Or maybe we should say that there is only a Hegelian approach from that what has been left. I will explore it in the final part of my speech. When we consider the Hegelian theory from a point of view of artificiality, the spirit expressing itself through the action and through the created objects, the question which comes to mind is the status of the earth, the place where we live, and our relationship with the natural background of human practices. I would like to ask the question of whether Hegel could say that the Anthropocene is exactly the final development of the spirit from a planetary point of view. To answer this problem, I introduce a theory proposed by Chinese philosopher Yu Hui. Hui emphasizes that Hegelian dialectics is based on recursivity. Recursivity means the movement which comes back to itself but is not a vicious circle, but rather a spiral with an unpredictable form. If we look at the Hegelian dialectics this way for the spirit, the movement is contingent, and because the awl of Minerva spreads its wings only with the falling of the dust, in the moment of action, we are not able to see its consequences, so there is no linear or predictable change. Recursivity, in the language of modern technology, is fundamental to the notion of an automaton or algorithm. Earlier machines, when faced with an obstacle, would stop working. Modern algorithms are able to integrate failures by enriching their system. Hui notes that the description of cybernetic machine is essentially what we mean by a spirit returning to itself. Since the spirit is a form of recursion based on the integration into the system of what is contingent, the status of nature can also change the spirit is a form of recursion based on the integration into the system of what is contingent. So the status of nature can also change in this system. On the one hand, nature is stable and based on unchangeable rights, but not for a human being. We live in nature, it's the background of our activities, the environment, or to use the best word in this context, the Umwelt, the world around us. The fact that according to Hegel, the more artificial and mediated relations with the world, the more developed humanity, affects the external nature, which also changes because the human attitude and knowledge of it change. Earth, as a planet, became a work of art when Apollo 8 took a picture of it, and we all could have seen the beauty of this planet. But with this picture, the environment turned into ecology. We changed our attitude towards the place where we live. Now it has to be protected, it has to survive, and even become a living creature, which suggests the concept of Gaia by Lovelock, who tries to name this new approach by introducing the concept of cosmotechnics, the unity of moral and cosmic order through technology, which according to him is exactly the Hegelian solution to technological progress and the dominating role of the human being, the spirit, in this world. The Hegelian system describes the inner recursive relation of the spirit with itself, but only through the mediation of the other. There is a possibility to understand who we are. On a cosmic level, the other is the earth, but is understood not as a static object of eternal rules, but as a living and changing creature, an artificial nature, literally the second nature. The last thing we philosophers have to consider in the age of rapid technological progress and the climate catastrophe inside which we live is how we can think and be philosophers when we see and know that human life will end someday in quite near future. Bernard Stiegler, the great French philosopher of technology, says, "This raises the question of how it might still be possible to think in the Anthropocene, in particular if we agree with Hegel's definition of thinking, not just as an isolated mental and psychic activity, solitary and atomized, but as a process for which mind or spirit is socialized and is so in the experience of its fundamental lateness." End of quotation. Hegel taught us that we can understand the process retrospectively. So, are we late? Is it too late to change the future? Probably yes. But are we late in our thinking? Probably not, because thinking, and this is a lesson from Hegel, can think itself in a process even if the understanding of its results comes at the end. Zizek, to mention him again, says that Hegel was an optimistic thinker who always thought about negativity as something which will finally will be negated. End short quotation. Very funny in my opinion. The Hegelian lesson with regard to the attempt to change the world is thus desperately optimistic. Such attempts never reach their goal, but through their repeated failure, a new form of being arises. End of quotation. It seems that we cannot forget that the spirit is in the machine, that there is spirit in the machine or any other technological artifact. There is the cunning of reason, and hopefully reason will emancipate us. The Anthropocene might be understood by us as the expression of the negativity of human development, but I believe that Hegel would not criticize the progress we made, but would rather say that we have to rethink our freedom in the climate catastrophe because freedom is inseparable with recognition. Maybe it is time to recognize nature as other for which we achieve our self-understanding no less and no more than we do through the other people. Ultimately, the Hegelian system is, after all, a holistic, recursive organism of spirit So in relating to nature, we are first and foremost relating to ourselves. Thank you so much. And now this worst part.
Thank you very much. We've now half an hour for discussion. Please.
Thank you for your thought-provoking presentation. It sounds fresh. I have one remark considering regarding the catastrophe. I would say that nature is not in danger and that there is no climate crisis. Because as already Professor Arndt mentioned, the nature is absolute. The life of Earth exists for billions of years and will exist for billions of years after humanity disappears. So it's humanity in crisis, and Earth is doing just fine. It's okay for nature. And my question, our question, that I find Hegel distinction between two kinds of mediation. The medium is obligatory for tools and science. And some scholars still work this distinction, and some mention it. What do you think about it? Do you find it in Hegel? That's why I mean, for example, you cannot call the crucifix as tool.
What I cannot call what?
The crucifix or language is not a tool.
Okay, so first of all, well, I agree with you too that nature is not in danger. But first of all, our attitude to nature changed when we also, through technology, made it available to look at the nature from the completely different perspective. And to be honest, Anthropocene expresses rather the fact that we have to rethink our position and our way, our attitude to the external reality, because we will extinct, not the nature, of course. And this two meaning of tools. Well, I agree with you. To be honest, I'm not trying to say that we can replace all of the Hegelian concepts, calling them tools, and just because this is, of course, this kind of danger in that what I said, that maybe tools and this instrumental way of thinking might be actually everywhere, and of course. I try to emphasize those moments in Hegelian system which might be connected with that how we understand technological artifacts nowadays and technological problems nowadays. This question about the science, in that what tools mean for science, I suppose. Well, it is interesting. I'm trying to build different associations in my mind, and probably, I don't know, I could find maybe some allies in the science, technology, and society approach, or for example, in the way how people interpret instrumentality, in the way how we proceed different scientific problems, for example, or how we, for example, understand notions or different concepts as also instruments of our knowledge. But this is for me too general. I mean that I rather try to focus on explicitly these moments in Hegelian philosophy when he says something about literally technology, and rather to show that it might be an inspiration for different modern problems and the way how we undertake them. Zeichen, okay, so science, right? Okay, I'm so sorry. So I completely misunderstood your question. But luckily I also invented something in the meantime for my own research. Okay, so yes, of course, language might be understood as a tool. So this way, of course, different signs and the way how we express each other through signs is also, of course, a kind of technology and tool. So I just think that it is a part of this approach, but maybe not the main on which I would like to focus. Because there are experts in the philosophy of language, in Hegelian philosophy, so I think I have nothing new to say to this approach, to be honest.
Thank you very much for your brilliant speech. I would like to attack only one aspect, in short. The spirit in this machine. It's not the spirit of man, not the spirit of human species, it's the spirit of mankind. It's the spirit of Samsung, Apple, YY, Mark Zuckerberg. To add this aspect, maybe is the perspective of Marx. As Marx asked, who is the owner of the machine, the medium, Produktionsmittel? What do you think about that?
Yes, well, first of all, of course, well, with this example of the smartphone, you also emphasize that, of course, as I tried to prove in my speech, we can think about the spirit as as extended, right? So we actually, for example, can think about our memory, our experiences through the tools we use. And of course, well, for example, I don't know how would you feel if you, for example, lose your smartphone somewhere here in Zadar? Probably you will have this impression that you lose something from your, I don't know, your memory, for example, or such kind of things. So, of course, the idea of the extended mind is an interesting approach to think about, well, individual mind as extended, but also the spirit as extended in a more general social way. And of course, I think that Hegel actually is aware about this problem of that who is the owner of the tools, because when he analyzes the abstract labor in the philosophy of right, he, in my opinion, he's aware about the possible negative consequences of mechanization of our life and our work. That is why he tries to maybe find some solutions which seem to be a little bit old-fashioned, as, for example, corporations, right? So we actually share with the other people the same values, the same ethics in our profession. We try to actually maybe this way protect also our collective property, right? So something what we collectively produce as a similarly to the concept of general intellect in Marxian philosophy. So of course the problem with the general intellect in Marxian theory is that we produce as humanity something collectively, but unfortunately the profit from this production is also only in hands of the concrete people. So actually this is the process of our cultural self-alienation, right? So that is why it has to be, of course, well, changed. So I believe that different solutions that Hegel tried to introduce to his, especially to his analysis of the modern society, might be an expression of this awareness that actually we are not all owners of the concrete products which are created, of course, but nowadays this problem is even much more important, because when we use our smartphones, we think that we do something personal, but of course we share with different companies lots of data, and of course the fact that this modern technology and this sharing is not always conscious is actually the problem which has to be solved if we are talking about the modern subjectivity. I'm sorry, I think I answered the questions maybe too long.
Okay, thank you. I would like to ask you, I would like to go back to the wide range hypothesis
you seem to accept Zizek's analysis that wiring brain would be a mediation of in a Hegelian sense. But if there even like wired brains, then to make their subjective state identical, there must be a spiritual mediation between social. So I think it's quite clear at the end of the encyclopedia where these three main syllogisms, and they are in a way how they disseminated into just a pure identity.
Well, I agree with Zizek with the fact that we need mediation, and I do not believe that this vision of the wired brains, which is suggested by him, and of course, well, the whole book is based on this discussion, well, what will happen if we will have this kind of wired brains, is actually, well, this is, I would say, a right problem with not so great justification, because there are different arguments, in my opinion, which would be more important than that what Zizek offered. But the question about that, how mediation is important to our culture and our self-understanding is crucial, right? And especially when we are talking in the modern times that we are constantly mediated by something, right? That we are in a constant process of having different relations with different medias. So, well, I do not agree with his argumentation, but I agree with the problem. But I'm much more optimistic in this, in the case of the solution. So I do not believe that, of course, this will be a global problem of the wired brains, rather. Maybe this is, this is again a provocative idea, just to start a book with such a statement, because it is, of course, well, very opportunistic, but unfortunately, argumentation is not maybe perfect.
You referred to Hegel's analysis of the medium of the meanings, and you told us that this aspect of continuity is a form of the power of the meaning. And I think there is in Hegel always a first application of this thing when he speaks about the system of economy. In the system of economy, you have some consequences of this continuity of the system. For example, you produce, but the society is not rich enough, and so on. And my question is, if you think of applications of media in our life, and the continuity, and the complexity, and all the things embracing our lives. And my question is, why is a society so conscious of the risks for the nature, but less conscious about the consequences of this inflation of means? Is it not a danger as well?
I think that Hegel wouldn't say that this is a danger, but because again, and you reminded me about this paragraph in the Philosophy of Right where Hegel writes about luxury. He says that actually luxury is nothing bad, because luxury is the expression of artificiality in the way how we produce different things. And it's a better emanation of humanity than, for example, using simple things, right? We can actually extend ourselves and express ourselves also by the luxury, for example. But of course, your question about this inflation and increase of different mediations nowadays, well, to be honest, this is the reason why I gave this speech. Well, actually, this is exactly something what we have to consider. And I think that this is interesting that Hegel, can be, and for many different researchers is, the thinker who actually gave us, Dennis will be maybe happy with this moment. Well, he gave us tools to do this, intellectual tools to do this. I cannot answer the question why or whether people are really conscious about this difference and rising levels of mediations. I'm not so sure. But the fact that we philosophers have a job to do to also make it clear and to analyze that what is going on around us, also in very empirical field of our everyday life and everyday technologies. Is that what we should do? So sorry for this only partially answer, but I think this is exactly that what should be done.
Thanks for the talk. Really thought-provoking. I found myself agreeing with you pretty much all the way through, but I just have a clarificatory question. So when you were talking about mental institutions, I understood you as kind of differentiating between two Hegelian theories of institutions. So one of them was the Habermasian Axel Honneth line of seeing institutions as something like a pattern of intersubjective recognition. And I took you then to be contrasting that with another theory of institutions inspired by Hegel as something like tools or techniques, a social instrument, something like this, that you mentioned, cap and organ projection, this kind of thing, in connection with that. Well, I guess my first question is this the contrast that you're trying to bring out? And my second question.
Excuse me, but you have to take your microphone a little bit, yes, because your voice is very strong, and to be honest.
Okay, I'll repeat that again. So two theories of institutions. One as a pattern of intersubjective recognition. Yeah, and then the other is something like an instrument or tool, a social technique. And you wanted to say that Hegel's really maybe offering the second kind, or at least there's something in Hegel that we can use to develop the second theory of institutions. So my question is, broadly, is this what you were trying to do? And then secondly, it just seems like it's possible to reconcile these a little bit. So it seems to me that you can understand institutions in this technical way that you wanted to, as a kind of tool for recognition, right? So it's like, yes, social institutions are tools, namely tools for intersubjective, for realizing intersubjective recognition. And then in that case, then there doesn't really seem to be much of let's say, an opposition between these two approaches. You can subsume the technical within the cognitive. So I just wanted to know what you would say in response to that. Thank you.
Well, to be honest, you answered to your question partially in the second part, because yes, I believe that, first of all, why I chose this concept of mental institutions, because I was really surprised that in the field of cognitive studies, Hegel became somehow popular, and in the cognitive studies, the interest in Hegel is mainly based on this assumption that the spirit is actually the kind of mind, can be extended and can be understood as a part maybe of inactive theory. And this concept of mental institutions mainly tries to catch that we have no such a thing as individual knowledge, and everything what we think is actually a part of a collectivity. And of course, if you're asking me the question whether there is a kind of tension between the role of institutions for intersubjective recognition, or I only treat them as an expression of some instrumental tools. I would say that they are the same, or this is the double meaning of that, what the institution is, right? Because on the one hand, of course, for example, we have the concept of educational system, for example, right? And of course, we know that we develop through education, and we know that, of course, we can, I don't know, criticize our teachers, or we can confront with different statements and so on. But on the other hand, all of this, what, for example, in the educational system is given to us, is also an effect of some collective knowledge which is shared with us. So there is a process of self-recognition from different institutions, building, of course, different social relations and so on. But on a very general level, there are also some kind of instrumental elements of the way how we share our thoughts, concepts, values with the other people. So I would say that institutions in this sense have this double meaning. And of course, in my speech, I wasn't so focused on the philosophy of right and the modern society, because I believe, for example, you are interested in this and maybe a better expert about in the case of social meaning of different institutions and this process of recognition. Whereas I would rather emphasize that we can, when we are thinking about more and more abstract and more not literally material artifacts which we produce, collective knowledge might be this kind of product as well. And that is why, of course, this is also part of thinking about that, how we actually mediate, of course, different our relations with ourselves, with the other people, with the external reality, but with more and more abstract forms of tools. And of course, mental institutions are a good example of this.
Thank you for your speech. And my concern is about the relation between external teleology and internal teleology and life. So you mentioned the chapter of teleology in the science logic, and which is followed by the chapter of life, and that includes the argument about internal teleology. And in that chapter, Hegel even says about the kind of neutrality of ends and means in the bodies of organisms.
Yeah, so?
So I think this kind of internal teleology can be helpful to think about or develop your idea in your conclusion that integration of contingency. And so I'd like to know your idea about the life chapter.
This transition, right, to the concept of life. Yes, of course. Well, to be honest, I expected that it might be asked this kind of question, because of course, and that is why I mentioned, for example, Juchniewicz, because he tries to use the concept of organology, organicism, and also, of course, his discussion about the concept of life is exactly motivated by the fact that we can think or rethink actually that what life is, especially when we have this lens of means and tools, right? So I can only agree with you, and of course, thank you for this question and comment, because this is the way how we can develop actually that what I said. So I hope one day we'll do this.
Thank you very much for this talk. My question is the following. You mentioned the discussion about the tool that we use towards the end of the logic. dialogue,
Uh-huh.
this discussion, which is quote as well. And also mention digital technologies. My question is the following. Could we not read this final part of the logic as it is responding in some way to Kant's question, was the first critique about how a priori synthetic judgments are possible? So, in a sense, I think Hegel is responding a little bit to the question, why do mathematics work? And his response is, as we all know, he that because, in a sense, the world is already conceptual, already produced by.
Yes.
But if this is true, then things like the Neuralink that you mentioned, which are the application of mathematics in the field of technology, digital technologies, and so on, will not make our access to each other or to nature more direct. Because they can't do it. It will be even more subtle to the level that we cannot even understand this mediation. So, do you not think that this will be, maybe this is what you wanted to say, to reconcile? But will this digitalization, because my question is, in fact, what about scientific theories that are used as tools to explain and act on the world? Are they a similar level as the clock or as mental institutions in your view? Thank you very much.
Okay, first of all, I'm trying to find a good solution how to answer to this question. It is very interesting. Thank you for this question. Well, first of all, when I quoted that paragraph from Science of Logic, I tried to emphasize that for Hegel, means change and they became the means for the another aims and so on and so on. So of course there is kind of the process, right, in this in the way how means operate actually. When we are talking about digitality and Neuralinks, well, in my opinion, they might be understood as the effect of this more and more abstract means which we apply to work and labor. And that is why it might be confusing, of course, that maybe there is no mediation at all, or it might be understood in some other way. But to be honest, I believe that this is rather the building of more and more abstract forms of means. And of course, when we have these examples from Hegel, when he writes about wood, this is something very, very concrete, right? But actually, of course, there is, in my opinion, this transformation of means. And now, because now I think I understand what you would like to say, that that in this process of transition, there might be less and less that what actually material is, and maybe there will be that moment of no mediation at all. But Zizek makes one huge mistake. Actually, he thinks that the communication between brains is something immediate, as if Neuralinks wouldn't be a kind of machine. And this is, in my opinion, the huge mistake of Zizek. Well, he doesn't see that that digital machine is still a machine. For example, now, well, this lecture is streamed, and there is even one participant. Maybe this is me, I'm not sure, because how it works. But of course, we might say that if I look at the screen, I can completely forget about the mediation of digital artifact in this process. But the fact that medias are negative, as I also try to prove, of course, using the theory of data mesh, does not mean that they don't do something. So that is actually, again, our, well, something what we have to undertake in philosophical analysis. Of course, there are lots of philosophers of technology, but I think Hegelian approach is interesting, especially because it gives us such concepts as mediation, sublation, dialectics, and it is, in my opinion, very helpful for actually developing media theories and particular philosophy of technology.
Okay, thank you very much for the lecture. We will meet again at 15 o'clock at the sections, and I hope you will come to the sections. And at 17 o'clock for the members of the Hegel Society, here is General Assembly.